Hey everyone, welcome back to Satisfactory News. This video is all about building more quickly and efficiently in Satisfactory. But if you think you already know it all, don't be quick to leave this video. There are building techniques and quality of life features that have been added to the game just in the most recent few updates that really transform building and make it a less tedious experience. Zooping. Some of you newer Satisfactory players may not know a world without Zooping, but for a long time we had to place platforms one at a time. Now you can enter Zoop mode while placing most buildables, although not buildings themselves. You can enter Zoop mode by pressing R while you're placing the buildable with the build gun, and pressing R again will change the mode from horizontal to vertical for things that it applies to. So you can either build out or build up. Simply click to place the first buildable, then move your cursor in the direction you want to build in and drag out the buildable, then click again to confirm the building. Zooping still uses all of the same materials as if you had built them one at a time, but it will use all of the materials all at once. This will save you time, but it is not infinite. You can zoop to a maximum of 10 items, which is still very useful when building large factories, but won't make it instantaneous. Nudge. Nudge is a newly added feature in Update 8. This allows you to place any buildable, then use the arrow keys to move it around before confirming its placement. You can do this by selecting a buildable, putting it in place, pressing the H key, and then using the arrow keys to nudge the buildable to the exact location you want it. Then simply click again to confirm the placement. This feature solves a few problems. It makes building much easier because locking the hologram allows you to move your character around it. Even if you don't use Nudge, getting a better look at where you're placing something can be very helpful. Normally you would need to find the perfect angle to place your building and hope that it's placed correctly. Nudge does have limitations though. You can only move it a certain distance, so use it only for a few meters of change. You can also nudge blueprints, which we'll talk about right now. Blueprints. Blueprints are a relatively new feature and they will help speed up your factory building. Blueprints are created in the Blueprint Designer, which is unlocked during Tier 4 of Hub Research, so you won't have it when you start the game. You can build blueprints within this 32 cubic meter space, then save the blueprints for later use. Blueprints also save any recipes that you load into the buildings within it, so you can make specific setups for iron or for copper or for limestone and label them as such. They will appear in the Blueprints menu, of which you can create subcategories for better organization. You can add them to your hotbar if you like for easier access. However, for balancing reasons, you can't zoop blueprints, but you can nudge them, which is very useful when you're working with such large and cumbersome buildables. Blueprints are perfect for commonly used structures in your factory, such as basic factory setups and decorative pieces. While the Blueprint Designer may seem a little limited, it's still plenty of space to speed up the grindiest part of the game and make the repetitive aspects of setting up basic factories that much quicker. Much like Zooping using all of the materials it would normally take, Blueprints will also use all of the materials needed to build all of those buildings. Blueprints have a special snapping mode that makes it easier to link blueprints together, especially when it comes to platforms. Additionally, when you are dismantling structures, you can enter Blueprint Dismantle mode by pressing R and dismantle an entire group of buildings that are part of a blueprint, rather than dismantling one by one. One of the common criticisms I see about blueprints is that you can't sample something you've already built. When using the Blueprint Designer, you must build something from scratch within the designer itself. Placing belts. Update 8 brought a few new quality of life fixes to the game when it comes to belts. So if you're used to the normal way of building from before this update, listen up. First of all, to place a new belt, you would normally need a building point for it, such as a conveyor pole. However, as of Update 8, starting to build a belt will automatically attach a conveyor pole with the belt, meaning you don't have to build two things just to set up a fresh belt. But that's not the only new feature that belts have. If you're building a belt and intend to add a tall conveyor pole, you would have previously had to build the pole first. Otherwise, you might end up trying to build a belt that makes an invalid shape, likely due to being too steep. But now you can actually lock a belt in place that would make one of these impossible shapes, then lift the conveyor pole up until it's valid. This feature is a little bit hidden, since it will initially appear red to signify that it's in an invalid shape. This is just another feature that makes building belts a little bit easier. These features apply to belts but also to pipes. Quick Switch. Quick Switch is a mechanic that lets you quickly toggle between similar buildings. For example, if you have a splitter selected, pressing E will cycle to mergers, smart splitters, and programmable splitters. Holding down E will open a radial wheel which lets you select a specific building from that category. This can speed up building if you happen to need a similar item to what you already have selected. It also works with blueprint categories. If you have a blueprint selected, you can use Quick Switch to switch between blueprints that are in the same category. Upgrading. Some buildables can be upgraded to a higher tier without dismantling the old one, as long as you have all of the materials for the new one in your inventory. It does not take into account the materials that you'll be refunded. The most common use case for this feature is upgrading belts once you unlock higher tiers, but it also works for some other objects. Miners can be upgraded and the power line and conveyor belts will remain intact. The same goes for power poles. You can also upgrade splitters in place, but instead of simply clicking on the splitter while a different splitter is selected, you have to hold the control key while doing so, otherwise they will attempt to stack up. The grid. There is an invisible building grid in Satisfactory that you can access by holding control while you're placing a foundation on the ground. This will snap it to the grid, and you can use this grid to make sure that all of your foundations are connectable no matter where you build them in the world. This makes setting up offshoot factories much easier and more cohesive. The weird thing about snapping to the grid is that foundations snap to the grid with their center point. This means that 1 meter foundations will be offset by 0.5 meters, compared to 2 meter and 4 meter foundations. So basically this means you need to choose either 1 meter foundations or 2 meter and 4 meter foundations to start your factory platforms, and then stick to that one that you selected. Rotating. Expanding upon the concept of the grid, you can hold control while building a foundation, then rotate it with the scroll wheel. Doing this will rotate it in 5-degree increments, allowing you to get very precise with how you build your factories. If you're not holding control, it will rotate in 45-degree increments, so you can still go off-grid but also have a little more control over it. With rotation, there are all kinds of possibilities, like making a cool factory with 4 angled arms with buildings on them, or even more creative builds that involve curves. Copying. Buildables can be sampled from the world by looking at them and pressing middle mouse button. So, looking at a constructor and pressing the sample button will add a constructor hologram to your build gun. You can also copy and paste recipes and clock speed settings. Each building has a copy settings button that you can click, then go to another building of the same type and click on paste settings. You can also use the common keyboard shortcuts Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V on buildings without actually interacting with them. You just have to be aiming at them. This really helps speed up the process of setting up a factory full of identical machines. Now, of course, there are countless other building tips and hacks for this game, such as building curves, doing crazy things with beams, and offsetting buildables with other objects to get crazy shapes and alignments. If you want to see a video about advanced building techniques like these, that go beyond just quality of life features like in this video, let me know and I will gladly work on it. I hope that you learned at least one thing about building in Satisfactory in this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like. If you know something I don't, feel free to leave it in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video, so be sure to subscribe to Satisfactory News. Thanks for watching.